What's up guys, Jeff Cavaliere, Athlean-X.com. So the best part about making mistakes is learning from them. And the good news is, we all make them. But do we all learn from the ones we make? That's the big question. Today I actually want to share some of my biggest mistakes that I made in every single muscle that you see up here on the board in an effort to try to grow them bigger and stronger. And we're going to start up here at the calves. And I get it, a lot of people don't even think about calves, and that is a mistake, but the bigger one is actually how you perform the repetitions that you do. Because if you're doing that with any type of bouncing or fast repetitions, and especially with lighter weight, your calves ain't gonna grow. And that's just a fact. Because if you look at the anatomy of the muscle itself, both the gastroc and soleus insert into one common tendon called the Achilles tendon, and it inserts on the back of our heel. Now, that tendon is built for highly explosive, ballistic type forces, enough to propel your body through space, and think about it, one leg at a time. So in what world do you think using light weights is going to stress this enough to make this muscle grow? Because we know that we need to overload a muscle to make it grow. Well, we're going to need to use the heavy weights for that. That being said, doing anything ballistically with bouncing is going to further feed into the function of the Achilles tendon to offload the muscle itself and take on some of those forces. That's not what you want to do when you want to grow that muscle. You want to become a lot more inefficient to create muscle growth. So what that means is slow it down. Take away the explosivity of the exercise. Instead, slowly descend into the bottom of every calf raise. And when you're at the bottom, hang out there in that stretch position for a count of 4. When you do this, you're taking away that rebound effect that's more suited for the Achilles tendon and forcing it to be done by the calves themselves. So in other words, initiating every contraction up is going to happen now through the force of the muscle, loading that muscle up more and leading to more muscle growth. So stop the bouncing, stop the light weights. It's not going to work. And believe me, I made that mistake for many, many years. Next up is the biceps. And of course, it's one of my favorite muscle groups to train, but I learned the hard way that there is one thing lacking in all the years I've been building my biceps up, and that is not fully extending my elbows on every repetition. Again, I mentioned I learned this the hard way because I tore my biceps tendon about 3 years ago when my son was walking on ice and he suddenly dropped. I went to catch him, and the next thing you know, pop. Now, I actually did a lot of research on the bicep tendon tears, and one of the leading factors for having these tears occur, especially in bodybuilders, when you remove steroids from the equation, is that they never really truly train through full range of motion. If you go through a full range of motion, you actually apply a stress to the tendons in the elbow and the insertions of the long and short head into the elbow. That just doesn't happen unless you go those extra 2 inches. And I get it. There's reason for not doing it. We all like to kind of hang on to that last little bit of locked elbow to make that next repetition easier. Hell, we even do it when we're doing pull-ups. We don't go all the way to full extension. But what's happening there is you're costing yourself the safety of that tendon and the longevity of that tendon long term that could set you up for something like what happened to me. And what happens when you get injured is you can't train the same way anymore. And for over 1.5 years, I had to modify my training because of the tear in my biceps. So you don't want to go through that. The simple fix is going through all of your bicep exercises, all those curl variations, and just simply applying a full extension at the elbow. Now, I'm not talking about some crazy contraptions and exercises that put your elbows way behind your body into extreme stretch. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not necessary. What I'm saying is just simply extending the elbows fully rather than keeping them locked out by 1 or 2 inches can pay off in a big way in terms of how your biceps actually develop and also your ability to keep them looking the way they are without any type of disruption with an injury down the road. Now, next up, we talk about the triceps. And for me, this is something that actually is related to my experience with my bicep tear. But it actually is really, really important for all of you, whether you had a torn bicep or not. That is, you need to focus on the long head of your triceps. And I talked about this before, it's the biggest portion of the tricep muscle. It's responsible for, get this, 2/3 of the size of the triceps, which we know is responsible for 2/3 the size of the arm. So it takes up a big portion of that muscle. Now, how do we do this? Through its contracted state and its most extended or stretched state. You hear a lot about people saying, oh, you got to focus on tricep stretch and muscle stretch and elongation. And it's a form of tension and a growth driver. But ignoring the contracted position of the long head is really ignoring a full tricep contraction opportunity, and not just for the well-being of your elbow joint. You do need to focus on full range of motion. Now, what I do here is I focus on a few exercises that get the muscle into its fully shortened state. And to do that, you have to have your arm behind your body to get that long head fully activated. When the elbow is behind the body and the elbow is extended, then you've got a contraction on the tricep unlike any other. Well, what exercises do that? Not a lot of the big fancy ones, but some of the little ones that become subject of ridicule. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. And I actually avoided things like dumbbell kickbacks, or things like bench dips done with just my body weight, or even something like a cobra push-up where I can get my arm closer to the backside of my body rather than a regular push-up. All of these things put the triceps in a more fully contracted state. Well, it was difficult for me because of this bicep tear, because it created more of a stretch position, right? Behind your body, extend the elbow, is going to have more of a stretch on the bicep. And that was an irritation for me because of the pain I had. So I got away from it. And guess what happened? My tricep shrunk. And I know that for a fact because you can't not do these exercises and have the best tricep development possible. So you need to include those. And of course, you still have to train the long head with those stretch focus exercises like the lion tricep extension or an overhead rope extension, because those do an amazing job at increasing the levels of tension in that muscle to drive further growth. But again, they have to both be done if you truly want to see your best tricep growth. Which brings us now to legs. Now, a lot of us have been given the advice, and I've been giving it to you as well, that in order to see the best growth from a muscle group or an area, is you need to subject that muscle to twice-a-week training. And what that means is our bodies are capable, as we found out, to responding to a stimulus for growth more frequently than we may have thought they were. And this is with a high enough level of training stimulus, right? The intensity is high enough to cause an adaptation, but not so high that you really can't get back out there and train it again. If you train a muscle with a good level of intensity and focus and effort, you can get it done twice a week and optimize the growth of the muscle because you have more opportunity for growth stimulus. Every 72 hours has been shown to be a good time to re-stimulate. Well, what if it comes to the legs and you just can't do it, right? It's just difficult because you got to get around, or you have a job that requires you to use your legs all day and it becomes too hard for you to do that. It doesn't mean that you can't do twice-a-week training. The best thing you can do is just split them up. Anterior and posterior training. And what that means is focusing on the quads in your anterior training and focus on your glutes and hamstrings in your posterior training day. And you can get those two workouts done in a week. And the good thing is you do get the overlap in leg exercises almost all the time because of the way that we train our legs. So we get some anterior effect when we're training our posterior chain exercises. If you're doing a leaning Bulgarian split squat, you're going to still get the quads as well as the posterior chain focus. If you're doing something like a step up, you're going to get an anterior chain focus if you're keeping your torso upright, or a posterior chain focus if you're leaning forward. But obviously the entire leg is being developed. Obviously, things like front squats would be more anterior chain focused on your quads, but still give you a good enough stimulation of the posterior chain if you're trying to re-hit them again for the second time in the week. But the idea is aim to train your legs twice a week in some capacity, and if you're not doing it right now, the best way to do that is by splitting it into that front side, back side focus. Next up is chest. Now, Lord knows I struggle with chest development for my entire life, and I did all the right things. Right? I scheduled chest workout number 1 of my entire life on Monday, International Chest Day. I went and I put weight on the barbell bench press, and I think it was actually maybe 10 pounds on each side, but I started where I should start. And I did the incline bench press, and I did the decline bench press, and I did Arnold's flies. One of the last times I ever did Arnold's flies, but the bottom line is I did all the things I was supposed to do, and the chest didn't grow. Well, now here I am 35 years later, and I'm still trying to work on my chest, but I have a different approach. And that is, I focus almost all my effort and all my pressing on incline pressing. And there's a reason for that. Number 1, greater range of motion. When we press through an incline bench press, you're going to have more travel of the bar, more range of motion, more work being done by the pecs in this variation than any other. And you can see that through these clips right here. You have more distance of travel from the bar up, and this is just due to the position of your body on the bench versus a flat or a decline position. The second thing is, it's also the one that's going to contribute to the area of the chest that's most likely to be underdeveloped even in people that have more developed chests. right? The lower chest is sort of almost always developed in people who do any type of chest training. And then we have the middle chest or sternal portion that, by the way, gets hit really well with almost every single upper chest focused exercise we do, certainly an incline dumbbell bench press or an incline barbell bench press. But the fact is, by almost shifting all of my focus now to the incline, it's not compromising the development of my middle chest. As a matter of fact, I think it's getting better. And finally, after all these years, it's starting to bring up that upper shelf of the upper chest that's been absent from me for my entire life. So don't be afraid of shifting the focus away from those flat bench exercises, because it's not like you're doing something wrong. You're still stimulating the chest. I think a lot of times we get stuck in an approach that we know we should do or we think we should do in terms of always flat bench pressing. But if it doesn't work for you and this does, then pursue this, because you're not going to compromise your body. Now, I will make this one note. If your shoulders are trash, like mine sometimes, you might find more comfort in doing a flat bench or even a decline bench variation, because it takes some of the stress off the shoulder. And if that's all you got, then that's what you should stick to. But if you have the ability to do incline pressing, then for sure I want you to make sure that you incorporate almost this entire shift, or attempt this shift for a short period of time to see what your results are. Now, we go to the back. Now, I've been a big advocate of back training for a long time, because I know as a trainer of athletes, it's not just what we see in the mirror, but it's what balances out what we see in the mirror that probably has the most functional impact on keeping an athlete strong and healthy. Now, the back needs to be trained, but one of my favorite ways to do it is with a bodyweight exercise, and it's the pull-up. Now, what I'm going to tell you is a few things are wrong here. People pursue pull-ups, if they do, in terms of how many repetitions they can get. And the mistake there is, while that's valuable in some regard, it's not the only thing. I think you need to try to turn that exercise into a compound strength builder, mass builder, at some point in your training by adding some additional weight around your waist. And even if you're just adding 5 pounds or a 10-pound plate, you're doing more than you were doing when you were simply doing bodyweight alone, pursuing more and more repetitions. That being said, there's a different effect taking place with a pull-up than there is with a lat pull-down any day of the week. You're not getting the same effect by just running over to a lat pull-down. And I will tell you this, there's not a person alive walking around right now that could do 20 unbroken pull-ups, 20, 25 unbroken pull-ups, that doesn't have an amazing back, that doesn't have a muscular upper body. Their arms will be developed as well, because your arms take a hell of a lot of a different stress when you're doing a pull-up than they do when you're doing a supported lat pull-down. A lot of the reason is you get those pads driving down to your knees, you're driving up against them, you've got a counter force to pull that bar down. It's just not as demanding, even if you have heavy weight on that machine, not as demanding as performing a pull-up in space with nothing to brace yourself against and to have just the strength of your core to help you to move your body through space efficiently. Do not stop doing the pull-ups. As a matter of fact, I want you to do pull-ups once, at least every 2 weeks, if not once a week, and it's some type of workout, whether you're doing pull or a back-focused workout. Next up, the shoulders. So here's one that I actually like. I love training shoulders, number one, and I love the exercises that I'm about to describe to you. And these are exercises that you can perform heavy that are directed more specifically at the individual heads of the shoulder. So yes, you might say, I do a heavy pressing exercise and it feels great. That's awesome, check that box, but it's not enough. You can't then go to the light side of the dumbbell rack and perform only light exercises for the rest of the front delts, middle delts, and rear delts. Now you have great opportunities to build those muscles up and overload them with exercises that can do that. So for me, let's start with the rear delts right off the bat. Doing a seated row with heavy weight is one of the best ways to build your rear delts of all the ways you could possibly do it. If you keep your elbows high and drive them back behind your body, you're likely using very heavy loads here on the exercise, and you're applying very heavy stress to those rear delts in a safe way that's going to grow them faster than any isolated rear delt fly you've ever done. Same thing when you do a high pull. I talk about this exercise all the time. No, it's not an upright row. It's maybe for some, it's an upright row done the right way, with the elbows facing down and the hands higher than the elbows. But what this does is it gets the middle delt really well, hits the rear delt really well. And what this is again doing is providing us an opportunity to use heavy weights on an exercise that can stimulate these heads so that they respond in a way that they probably haven't responded for you so far. A cheat lateral is another way that I love to do this. I just load up the weight sometimes 45 or 50 pounds, and I utilize a lot of swing into the exercise, but I have to control it on the way down, or at least attempt to control it eccentrically. And it provides a stimulus to the middle delt that just, I don't think, can be replaced by simply performing light, strict lateral raises. There's a place for all that strict stuff. It works. But when you're trying to get into these exercises, even something like here, this is called an abduction row, where you're getting the shoulder and the middle delt, again, and the rear delt. All these heavier exercises give us a great opportunity, but you need to pursue them if you want to see optimal delt development to complement the heavy pressing that you're already doing. It just can't end at just that one heavy exercise focus. Next up, the abs. I think my biggest problem here, and it comes again from my training of athletes, is that yes, we focus on calling them ab exercises, and we talk about ab exercise, I talk about ab workouts here all the time. But really in my head, all the time, I'm thinking core. These are core workouts. And one of the things that you can do to improve the outcome of all the exercises you perform is to strengthen your core. And what that means is including exercises like carries, or including exercises like a pull-off press that we can do as correctives if we want to do it that way. Because again, you should be performing correctives every single day in some form if you want to maintain your health and longevity in the gym. Just one exercise is all you need. If you do core exercises or core training as part of a corrective, or core exercises as part of daily ab routine, you're going to start to increase the stability of your body. Now, rotational ab work, anti-rotational ab work, anti-extension work, anti-flexion work, weighted planks, it's all important. But I'll give you a caveat. Taller athletes will need this a lot more than really short athletes. Really short athletes don't create the torque and limb length that creates the real need for the rigidity of the spine and torso through movement in space. So when you get those long, lanky athletes, they especially need to train all these functions and these controls in the different planes of anti-rotation and anti-extension. When you get to the really short athletes with short limbs and not a lot of torque creation going on because they don't have long torsos or long limbs to do that, it might be a little less important, but it's still an important part of every training routine to make sure that you have some focus on developing the rigidity of your body in space. That pillar strength is critical. And again, if we just think about it as ab training, we're probably going to miss that. Lastly, forearms. So here we go. So I'm just talking about corrective exercises. A lot of you guys probably think, well, I'm out of this video. I don't need to talk about forearms. You do. As a matter of fact, my friend Sylvester Stallone said that if there was 3 muscle groups he could train on an ongoing basis, it would be his forearms, his arms, and his neck. Why? Because it's the only 3 areas you see. No matter what short sleeve shirt you have on, you're going to see those 3 areas, so you want to make sure you develop them. I'm going to go further than that. Having strong forearms is going to set up the better, improved performance on all the bigger exercises you do in the gym. But if I want to make your job a little bit easier, I'm going to say focus on just one. And the area you want to focus on are the exercises that work the extensors of the forearm. And one of my favorite ways to do this is one that you're seeing right here, just by setting up a wrist roller environment, which you could do just by putting a kettlebell or a weight on the end of a barbell here that's in a rack, and then just rolling your wrist back. Why is this so important? Well, the flexors of the forearm tend to get a lot of work just based on the fact that they tend to jump in as cheating muscles on our pull exercises. So when you're rowing and they tend to bend backwards, or when you're curling and they tend to bend backwards, or doing pull downs or pull-ups and they tend to bend backwards, you're getting a lot of inadvertent flexion work in your forearms. But we really, very rarely get that extension work in the forearms, which is important for creating not only a balanced forearm, but also for protecting the elbow joint and preventing some of the elbow pain that we get that sort of disrupts our training. So if you had to only do one thing here, I'd work it in as a corrective exercise because it could be viewed as such. And it's going to pay off big dividends just by focusing on the one area that you're probably not doing at all. Now, if you want to create a more complete form, then you're going to want to go a little bit further than that. But I did put together a video for you with all the different functions of the forearms and how to train them all very easily at home. You can watch that video here. If you found the video helpful, guys, make sure you leave your comments and thumbs up below. Tell me what mistakes you're making, and I'll try to address them maybe in a separate video if they're not already addressed here. All right, guys, click subscribe, turn on notifications, and also full programs are available over at Athlean-X.com. I'll see you soon.